Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular ARB meeting of Thursday, November 6th, 2014. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Chair Lippert.
Present.
Vice Chair Pop.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Present.
Board Member Gouyer.
Here.
Okay, we have 5 present. Oral communications, this is the time when members of the public may speak to something that is not on today's agenda. Do I have any speakers here? No? Okay, with that, any agenda changes, additions, or deletions?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lippert. The item number 3, 1050 Page Mill Road, is postponed to November 20th as noted in the agenda. Also, there's a change as far as the subcommittee terms that we'll be talking about later, but basically Claire serves today, I think, yeah. So, and instead of Randy, and then Randy will, will begin on subcommittee as of November 20th. And that's.
Okay. Okay, with that, we have the first item, which is continued from 10/16/180 El Camino Real, request by Simon Property Group, Inc., on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Leyland Stanford Junior University for architectural review of Phase 3 of the Stanford Shopping Center redevelopment, including 4 new retail buildings in the location of the former Bloomingdale's. The 4 new retail buildings have gross floor area of 131,105 square feet and a net floor area of 119,799 square feet. The project includes associated site improvements and the redesign of the center's entrance drive from El Camino Real. It's zoned community, commercial, CC, environmental assessment exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, per CEQA section 15302 and 15304. And we have a new staff planner with us today.
Before we start, I need to recuse myself from this item because I'm a Simon Properties stockholder, so I'll be back for the next item.
Okay, great. We will come and get you. If you'd like to introduce yourself and the item.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Lippert and board members. I'm Rebecca Atkinson, a new planner here with the City of Palo Alto. In regard to the project before you, this is the second formal hearing on the project, and the project description remains as you described, and there have been no changes to floor area or massing since the first formal hearing on October 16th. The applicant has revised the project plans in response to the feedback and motion from the October 16th ARB meeting. Attachment E contains a detailed list of revisions, which include addressing floor area, the design of owner-provided walls, coordinated paving and landscape plan, and addressing bicycle parking. Additional materials are available to support your discussion today regarding the project, including a color and material board that is starting next to board member Pop. Board member Liu. Okay, and also the paving samples that you also saw last meeting. Staff has not received any public comments on the project to date. And the staff and the applicant had the opportunity to review the staff report and draft conditions of approval before today's meeting. The topics that came up largely pertained to phasing of the project, such that in timing of submittals at building permit stage, mostly pertaining to concerns of keeping critical path items such as the core and shell permits for the buildings on track. I believe the applicant would like to clarify some of those items today. Staff feels comfortable with the conditions of approval that are outlined in attachment B, and prepared for ARB review and consideration, and also welcomes ARB member refinement, adjustments, and clarifications. especially in regard to the items that staff believes should come back for ARB subcommittee review. The applicant would like to clarify the proposed light fixtures and light poles and so forth. So I believe we'll have some presentation on those fixtures. There was a question about whether or not the fixtures were used elsewhere in the shopping center at the last meeting. The applicant will also clarify tenant facade design direction that they have been providing their future tenants, designs for owner-provided walls, and any project phasing concerns as it relates to site improvements and parking, building permits, as I mentioned before. Staff is recommending approval of the project, subject to conditions and, of course, the findings. And I'd be happy to clarify or answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll follow the procedure of the applicant will have a 10-minute presentation. If you just mind, just very briefly in the beginning, just sort of describe the project again so that anyone who's watching on television can understand what's going on, and then just you can go into the changes that you're making. What we'll do is then we'll go back to the board. Board will have a round of questions. We'll open the public hearing. Members of the public that want to speak to this item can do so. And then we will return to the board for discussion and hopefully a recommendation. And before we go and we vote on the whatever the motion is, we will give you a chance to have a rebuttal or just follow up with any comments that you might have with regard to the motion.
Okay, well, thank you. My name is John Lee with the architectural firm of BAR Architects in San Francisco. We're the architects for this particular project. I'd like to make an introductory statement before we launch into our presentation. While we concentrated our attention mostly on the redevelopment component of Phase 3, which is the 4 new buildings that you've described and the associated site improvements. In our previous hearing on October 16th, I'd like to stress that the redevelopment is really a piece of a much larger renovation vision and effort of the entire Stanford Shopping Center. 2 of our design goals from the start have been to reinvigorate the original complex by stripping away layers of now outdated architectural treatment to its essence, and to reintroduce a new vocabulary of modern features that best support and enhance the community's enjoyment of the many public spaces within this beloved center. 2, to fully integrate the new and the old, and vice versa, to the greatest extent possible by 1, choosing unifying materials. An example is the paving material that we've described last time in October 16th, and the paving treatment of both the old and the new. And 2, strategically allocating our resources to the most impactful designs, and that's one of a good example of that is the design of our new Pavilion 5, which is both derived from and in turn informs the renovation design of Pavilions 2, 3, and 4. And then 3, the design of the new buildings with layout and massing that are complementary to the existing buildings. For example, our 1-story buildings match the existing adjacent buildings, and our 2-story buildings are designed to be proportionately compatible with Bloomingdale's, which is a 3-story building. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to start addressing, if I may, the three items that are in motion for continuance for ARB review and consideration. In the urban design elements section, such as paving, patterns and materials, landscaping, site lighting, and pedestrian amenities, we have revised our sheets 1.0, 1.1a, 1.1b, and 1.2 to show the new work line to include Portico Way, north of buildings AA and BB, up to the edge of Pavilion 2. This work line was defined through dialogue with the ARB subcommittee on October 16th and encompasses our renovation of the trellis arcade number 1 and the existing and the 2 existing fountains. So we've added sheets 3.13, 3.14, 3.15, and 3.16 to further define the scope of work. Briefly, I'd like to point out in this rendering, which is another new sheet that we've added to our packet. This rendering shows a view down Portico Way, and to the right is the renovated structure of our arcade trellis number 1. This is the design that we are implementing through all of the trellis arcade structures that we have sprinkled all around this particular center. And to the left is a depiction of the renovated fountains and planters that will receive new planting while keeping mature trees, which is shown here, intact. As a matter of fact, we're modifying the planters to allow more soil space for the trees to grow healthily. And then we're revising the edge of the planters for more seating opportunities. And they are also designed with backs for those of us of the, of the baby boom generation. So we've also revised our paving plan, 1.1a and 1.1b, to show the limit of the interface where our new paving meets the existing Bloomingdale's paving. And when you look at it, this area is really demarcated for where the Bloomingdale paving comes to meet our paving. So that is a very limited area of influence. Our plan is to the 10-foot sidewalk that is currently along here on the face of Bloomingdale's is a temporary sidewalk. So that will be removed when we come around to pave, to pour our new sidewalk here. And that paving treatment will be coming right up to against the face of the building. So there isn't any kind of interface between the paving along the face of the Bloomingdale's. And then further down, this particular drawing shows the limit of the interface of Bloomingdale's on the south side. And that constitutes about 36 feet. So in all, at these interface zones, we admit that the concrete treatment and the color will be different, as you see in that sample. But we believe that it is consistent with the paving at Bloomingdale's, which is your standard gray concrete sidewalk treatment. But here we will be redoing our score lines to coincide with the Bloomingdale's score pattern, so you can sort of see that we're carrying these score lines across. So regarding the trees at Shopping Center Way, that's another item. Our sheets 1.2 and L 2.1 show that we are keeping the 4 strawberry trees, funny name, but 4 strawberry trees, in the Bloomingdale's parking lot, and adding 3 new corresponding trees at the Fleming side, which is over here, to flank the Art Plaza entry and into Portico Way beyond. And this is in direct response to one of the comments that was given in our October 16th hearing. And by not removing these trees right here, we are now meeting the 50% shading factor requirement for the parking lot. By the way, this particular drawing also shows a reduction of the stamped asphalt treatment here back to be concentrated at the crossing. And we believe that that is a good move because the stamped concrete has always denoted pedestrian crossing. And where we had that extent all the way out to here, it may be a confusing factor for both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. We are now taking the 3 tulip trees away here to better facilitate and accommodate pedestrian traffic flow around the uncovered patio seating area, which is shown right here. This area is well buffered from the vehicular traffic by an adjacent planted bioswale, which, is not quite apparent in our original submittal, but we have colored it here. So the protection that the tulip trees had against the vehicular traffic now is being replaced by this bioswale, which we believe creates a nice buffer. And the 3 bike racks that have been moved, these 3 bike racks here, boy, I'm a little behind schedule. The 3 bike racks here have been removed to the south side. So addressing the second comment, treatment of blank walls alongside paseos. We explained in the last ARB hearing, we arrived at the extent of code-required fire-rated walls. ARB requested that we demonstrate how these blank walls could be treated to make them more interesting and inviting. Together with Simon Properties, we created a new sheet 3.5A, which shows the possible tenant design additions in form of graphics, display cases, and applied building material finishes that will complement the tenant storefronts. And this requirement that Simon has actually specifically added to their tenant design criteria. Item number 3, bicycle parking. This is kind of a long dissertation, so I will just summarize. We have requested that the new bicycle parking spaces, which amounts to 96 new spaces, 75% of it be installed on day 1 of phase 3 construction, and 25% be held in reserve to be installed at a future date as demand dictates. Quantity and location of these spaces, well, including the existing spaces, are indicated here in color-coded form. So if you were to look at this table, you can get a good idea as to what we're trying to do here. And then I'd like to point out specifically that we have relocated 5 bike racks to this area right here in front of Neiman Marcus Apple Store Plaza. And this resulted from a site walk meeting that we had with Chief Transportation Official Jaime Rodriguez on October 27th. So that is an input that we actually received from him that we created those 5 spaces.
Can you sort of wrap things up and
Yeah.
just tell us just enumerate what the changes are that you've made quickly?
Well, those are the changes that we've made to the
Okay,
booklet.
so you're
And
done?
then, yeah, I'd like to just have a conclusion statement.
Okay,
if I
that'd be
might.
great.
Okay. So we are aware of the various conditions of approval that you have noted, and we believe that we have addressed many of these conditions of approval in our presentation today. But for those that are still remaining outstanding, we are prepared to schedule a work session with the ARB subcommittee as soon as possible to resolve them to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's not the way the subcommittee works. The
Oh, okay.
subcommittee works after an approval, just finalizing details.
Okay.
So whether you get an approval or not, we'll see whether there'll be subcommittee time. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin with questions. Board Member Liu?
So thank you for the changes. I have a couple just nitpicky questions. So on the, maybe I'll start with landscape. So on the entry drive, I think you're proposing you're adding 3 arbutus trees on the front to match the Bloomingdale side.
That's right.
And I just wanted to clarify, I mean, there are 2 varieties, and I think the one that's specified is the one that has fruit. And I was wondering if that was a conscious choice. I mean, it seems like because it's kind of a messy tree when the fruit drops, and it seems a little strange at the at the entrance to a shopping center.
Well, that is really a question for
For Gary.
For Gary to answer.
Yes, thank you.
Gary Lehman with the Gazzardo Partnership. So we are batching the trees, as we said, that are on the southern part of the parking lot, and the fruit issue has not really been a problem. We've been using the tree at the center, and it's been performing well, and this is going to be mostly in the planting beds itself, so it should be a good situation there.
Okay, well, it's one of my favorite trees. I like the branch structure is really very dramatic, and it's a very handsome tree. I just think of it as a lawn, mostly like a backyard tree that you would fit in a lawn or something, more than a street tree. But
We like
but
that
if you've been using it and it's working, that's fine.
We like that red bark and the vineyards and the coloration of Fleming's there. It seemed like it was a nice, rich application.
Okay, and I have one more landscape question for you. You have the prunus columnar trees in between Bloomingdale's and the new buildings, and I think that space is actually potentially very handsome space between them. And I was thinking that the trees that you're proposing are fairly small. I mean, they're like shrubs, really, right? Like 8.
They're large
feet?
shrubs, and the intent there is that they would be topiary type plants, so they take well to shearing, and so we wanted to have something that was nice and compact and had a nice foliar quality to it, kind of in contrast with the other planters in that area.
Had you considered something one scale up from that, possibly?
We
no?
thought that space, both because of the scale of the buildings on either side, that having something that was a little bit more intimate, particularly as it related to the seating and everything, was actually a good thing. The building is going to have this very fresh, nice quality to them, and we weren't seeking to compete with that so much, but just to give something that was kind of in character with the pedestrian seating that's in that area.
Okay. Thanks, Gary.
Sure.
One last question for you. In Lady Ellen Place, you have a lot of new planters, right?
Yes.
And as I'm understanding it, these are all like grade? And it's different than a lot of the existing shopping center has raised planters, and there's sort of integral benches. And as my understanding, this is not So this will be different?
That's right. Those square planters you see in the plan, the planters themselves are flush with the adjacent paving. They actually are actually recessed a little bit, about a foot lower. They sort of taper to about a foot lower than the adjacent paving because they also act as stormwater treatment. So that whole area drains into those planters. It also takes water from the adjacent roofs in that area. So the planters themselves are down flush with grade, but there are built up seat wall type planters on either side. So there's sort of an homage back to the main portico way, kind of a similar
Right.
sort of application there, but the plants themselves are down low.
Okay, great, thank you.
Board Member Guyer?
I have no questions at this time.
Vice Chair Pop?
Yeah, a couple questions for staff. I'd like to understand, from your perspective, what would trigger the bike parking reserve being implemented? You know, we're talking about this idea of holding back a certain number of the bike stalls and placing them around where need dictates, but what would trigger us saying there's a need, let's put them in?
The applicant has submitted a bicycle report from Fair and Piers, and Fair and Piers recommended annual surveys of demand and so forth. And I would think that staff recommended that the bicycle parking come back to subcommittee for further refinement. I do suspect that demand would dictate, installation of these the bicycle parkings, lockers and racks that would be placed in reserve. So
It's just a question of where, right? Yeah, okay.
correct.
But
But
there will be an annual review that establishes need potentially, and then action that comes from that review?
correct. And the bicycle plan is intended to demonstrate, the bicycle plan in the actual plan set is intended to demonstrate where all of the required bicycle parking spaces would be implemented, and then just designate a portion that wouldn't be implemented right of way.
Okay. That's all I have, thank you.
Yeah, I want to follow up with that. What about having the bicycle parking occur, the upgrades to the bicycle parking occur as they go through with the update of the shopping center? I don't think it makes sense to put in a bunch of bicycle racks or bicycle parking spaces and then have to sort of move them during construction, but surely when they're doing the rest of the shopping center, that can be part of the condition of approval and completion of the shopping center. That way we're assured that they get included.
I think the way the conditions of approval are worded, I think it would accommodate that. Certainly, the bicycle parking would need to be installed before receiving a certificate of occupancy for the new buildings. And it's my understanding that the applicant would be able to clarify when they would be coming in for the rest of the renovation work. So maybe that timing could be coordinated. It would make sense, as you said.
Okay.
But possibly the applicant would have some clarification remarks about their proposed timing.
Okay. And then I have a question regarding paving for the applicant between the Bloomingdale's store paving and the building DD, new building paving. What you've used is a very similar paving pattern, but significantly different sizes of paving. Where you have the demarcation is a bit problematic because of the smaller stones lining up with the larger pattern. Why not just run that larger pattern past the sort of the demarcation line and have it die into building DD, and where you've got all that cafe seating? Thank you very much. That's a lot better. So have that pattern continue across, die into building DD, and end where that planted strip is, right in the front of building DD. You follow me?
Not completely, but I do see what you are in general talking about. We'll have a look at it and see whether if it makes sense. That
I mean, what I see here is that the way paving is laid says a lot in terms of how people traverse through a space or perceive the space.
absolutely.
And so when you cross those bands horizontally, it's different than perpendicular to that. And so what would happen is that the pedestrians that are coming along the exiting Bloomingdale's there are basically brought along on that paving area, and if you have that abrupt edge, it's almost like a wall. Whereas it would almost feel seamless if that continued horizontally across.
Right.
Okay. Okay, and then I had one other question. Could you please just go through very, very quickly the idea for the marketing walls, or the walls that the blank walls that have the displays on them? Can you describe those a little bit more?
Sure. Mark, can you bring on that one exhibit that shows the blank walls treatment? No, the blank walls. Okay, so it's a little hard to see, but we've elevated those blank walls. Yeah, here we go. This is the south elevation of building CC, which faces the parking garage. The idea here is that we are required to have certain amount of square footage of wall surface that are fire rated. So as base component, we're building those fire rated walls, including these service doors needs to be fire rated. But our idea and what's stated in the criteria, design criteria, is for the tenants to come in and do an overlay of showcase. I mean, they have a choice of showcases, which this indicates, bright wall panels, which is graphic panels that are lit, which these indicate, and then in this particular elevation, we show the tenant storefront comes around to the side, which really does occur on the east elevation of building CC. We have allocated, the end parts of those walls to be tenant storefronts. So in all, this is just a composite picture of what could happen, with these kit of parts. Where, this is one tenant in its floor through, and they provide their branding and their selection of graphics to put on this wall as an overlay on top of our fire rated required walls. And that's just a graphic representation. Who knows? I mean, ARB will probably have review rights over all these storefronts, as the tenants move in.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll open the public hearing. This is the time when members of the public may speak to this item. If you wish to do so, you need to fill out a speaker card. Have no speaker cards. Okay, we'll return to the board for comments and discussion and hopefully a motion. Board Member Liu.
Okay, so I have a question for staff on the, so on the sheet A3.5, right? The graphics. So I think just to clarify, we only look at the storefronts that face public streets, right? So we don't really get to review, we're not really going to review any of the internal storefronts, just to clarify. And then I think it seems to me this opens up a little concern is what is signage versus what is whatever, merchandise or fashion, whatever, decoration. And so I think that we just should be clear about that, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's a vinyl graphic that's a sign, then it's not necessarily allowed, right? We don't allow, is it vinyl graphics on windows, right?
We allow,
But if it's a display case, then I think it's not, the code doesn't really cover it, correct?
right, we do allow a full display case. We allow 20%. Excuse me, 20% of the window can be signage with those affixed.
Right, and that's a window, right? But that's not a, yeah, okay. So, so if these are all display cases, then there really could be any, we don't really, as we have, the code is written, we don't have any restrictions on size, yeah.
Right, and I remember we had the L'Occitane.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that. in particular.
Yeah, and I think they came around and ended up doing a tile or something that was attractive. It wasn't just a light box with vinyl. So I think there's precedent for looking at this at the ARB if it's facing the right-of-way.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I had one last question for the architect. Sorry about that. On Pavilion 5, you have lots of very beautiful lattice work and tracery. And I was wondering if there's concern about nesting birds and pigeons.
There is a concern about nesting birds
Yeah.
throughout the whole complex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So we're introducing mitigation measures, in form of nets or whatever, but we haven't completely spec'd them yet, but we know that they will be there, because it's a concern for Simon Group as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nets and the Nixolite and stuff, I mean, they're not ideal. What I've seen happen here, like downtown, is that the trellis goes up, and then in one case, like, the trellis just disappeared and was just removed from the building altogether, and nothing ever replaced it. And so that would be my main concern, is that it's done, that it's properly managed, and the trellises just don't disappear. And then because there's no ARB project, then we don't have anything to require, some sort of replacement.
Right, but all I can say is that is a concern for everybody here involved.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So we're doing all of our due diligence research to come up with a system that will satisfactorily mitigate that problem.
Okay, and then I have one last question. All the paint and plaster that you're showing is kind of like a French gray color, and that's very different than the sandstone color the existing sandstone color that's there on the shopping center. And I was just wanted to know if all of those other existing areas are being repainted as part of another renovation project, or is there actually going to be different colors on the common areas that are not storefront?
The intent is for all the new storefronts to go full height. So in a lot of ways, you can see there right now, a lot of the new storefronts cover up the original color.
But not all of them. I mean, there's a sort of, at the moment, there's sort of a mix and match, right? It's not uniform. It's not all of the storefronts are going up to the top, or at least not yet.
Right, that's right.
Okay. Is there?
Would this be?
Basically, Kathy Shields. Ultimately, in our tenant criteria, any tenants, as they're changing, as their leases are coming up, are being required to go to that full height. By 2017, most of them will have done that, so we will have a consistency throughout the center. To the extent we're opening, re-grand opening the center, and there are a few who haven't, we will paint out to match with the redevelopment for an interim measure, but the long-term fix is everybody will go full height.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Okay, so anyway, I think this is a very handsome project, and I would say that the dividing the old Bloomingdale's footprint into a grid of smaller squares is a very wise choice, and it makes it much more pedestrian friendly, having smaller blocks to circumnavigate around, and it gives more choice to pedestrians, and which is always a good thing. You know, so the big super block kind of scale is isn't so great. And I think you see that right now with the existing Bloomingdales. It kind of creates kind of a dead zone around Bloomingdale, the old Bloomingdales. And I would say that my main reservation about the project is the blank walls that face the ones that face the street. And then I think that the staff has been very good about it, putting it in the conditions of approval, I think. And then those facades will come to the board for review, so we can address the blankness at that time. And I can support the bike parking reserve, and I think it's generally it's a very handsome look. My personal take on it, I wouldn't require any changes, but is that it looks, to me, I would bump up all the landscaping one more scale. I like the ginkgo trees, I like the arbutus trees, but with the removal of a lot of the canopies and awnings, it feels a little bit stark to me. But that's just, but I would not require any changes at this time. So, thank you.
Guyer? Hold on 1 second.
I know we're in the questions moment at this point. I just want to make sure we're getting the public hearing.
No, I opened it and I closed it.
Oh,
you were sleeping.
I was sleeping. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't close it yet, but I did open the public hearing. Board Member Guyer?
Okay, on that note, actually, I like the efforts that you've done, to address our concerns, and obviously, a lot of this is going to depend on what tenants you get in there. I mean, and how they design their particular areas. So I think if you're willing to, do this sort of effort that you show on 3.5A on the sides that are not or are technically yours, I can, accept this or forward this on the way it is now.
Vice Chair Pop?
Great. I want to say that this is a beautiful design, really an excellent application, very thorough and detailed, and I'd like to suggest that this become the kind of document that staff shows to other applicants. I think you've done a really beautiful job here of explaining your project, and the quality and character of what you're proposing is really outstanding. I only have a couple of, really nitpicky suggestions, and really they are just suggestions. I think your design is just terrific as it is. I'm going to go back to a comment that Chair Lippert made in regard to the paving, and I have actually a different suggestion than his. I don't mind you having a consistent paving that surrounds all 4 of these new buildings, that all of this sort of lives within its own puddle, but I'd like to see whether or not there's an opportunity to allow some of the features that are on the Bloomingdale site, such as where the sculpture is, there's sort of a lollipop where a sculpture is, that just ends immediately at the line of work and doesn't extend across the line. I think if we start to allow subtle extrusions of one item into another, this sort of fingers overlapping the boundaries a little bit, it won't feel so much like this area was remodeled and that area wasn't. When I do additions to structures, my goal is always to make it look like it was always meant to be there. It was part of the whole. It was intended from the onset. And just looking at the way this works, if the pieces keyed into each other a little bit more, it might feel more natural. And so I wanted to suggest you might look at that. It's not a obligation in any way, but I think it would make it more attractive and more interesting if they did interact a bit. Let's see. We talked about the parking. I notice on page 3.5, where you describe the south elevation of building CC, that's 3.5, you have a note about relocating the acrobat structures. And when I look at 3.5A, where you're talking about the potential tenant improvements that might occur on those buildings, that sculpture is not shown. So could you just describe your intent for that?
Yeah, we have originally, we thought the sculptures would be a good addition to that wall, but in looking at it, it kind of falls in the tenant improvement category. So it would be a problematic. So we decided to just remove that.
So it will stay where it is for the time being, the acrobat sculpture?
Well, the acrobat sculptures are going to be removed because we're redoing that whole arcade
Okay.
in front of that building.
All right, so those will be put away for a time or
Yeah,
something? Okay.
sight unknown.
My kids love those. I am a little bit concerned about the light boxes. I think that's something that you'll want to control carefully. I've seen a number of those done in a number of different ways, and depending on the graphic that's applied, the intensity of the LED really needs to be tweaked and adjusted so that they come out fairly consistent. We don't want anything that's horribly glaring or too dark, but a very even illumination seems fine to me. I am a little bit concerned about the language here where tenants are encouraged to extend their storefront designs. I think without this kind of decoration, there's a pretty significant opportunity for a dull area of the site. But I think that in general, when I walk around the shopping center, there's so much going on. It's really beautifully managed that I'm not overly concerned about that. You did mention that you had some information about the light fixtures for us, and I wanted to just ask if you could share with me what your thought is on that.
Yeah, we are replacing all of the existing pole lights that are currently that older model of Polson fixture, clear around all the perimeter as well as internal to the project. And they occur in all the walking main street areas and the plazas that, like Lady Allen Place, for instance. The intent is to replace them with a like Polson fixture, which you see installed in front of Fleming's right now. But we're not going to replace it with specifically the Polson fixture because we had some information regarding serviceability and all that sort of thing. So we are right now looking at what's submitted in this submittal is the beacon fixture, which in its dimensions and performance pretty much matched the specs that we liked, but we're still looking for a better suited alternative that we'll be placing in those areas, and we'll submit that exact fixture once we found it.
So your feeling is that the luminosity of that fixture will be equal to, or will it be brighter than or less than the existing fixtures?
No, it would be equal to the Polson fixture.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We've done photometric studies for all the fixtures that we're looking at, and we're still doing that. That's one of the criteria of selection.
Okay, that's terrific. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. That is everything that I have. Thank you very much.
I'd like to begin by saying that I've been reviewing Stanford Shopping Center now for close to 17 years. And in some ways, I'm a little disappointed by this last go around of reviewing your project. Stanford Shopping Center has always been a high quality shopping center that has always stood out and has been a wonderful experience going there. My first reviews of Stanford Shopping Center were the actual monument signs that were along Sand Hill Road and the identification of Nordstrom as well as Crate and Barrel and the other buildings in that center, as well as the ones at the corner of Arboretum and Sand Hill Road. And through the years with the Sand Hill Road expansion and Stamford West housing, Stamford was allowed to expand the shopping center and actually make it bigger, and with that were criteria for building new buildings. The P.F. Chang building, the Wilkes-Bashford building, and then the building that's sort of to the back where American Girl is now located. And each one of those buildings, the first two were just exemplary. They were just wonderful buildings. In fact, they had both won AIA Design Awards. They were that good. And they really talked to the quality and character of this shopping center and distinguished it separately from, I think, any other shopping center in the San Francisco Bay Area, almost high quality enough to similar to what was in Country Club Plaza in Kansas City. The Bloomingdale's store, I think, was probably the last exemplary quality building that I've seen built there, and I thought it was really very good. The Flemings, I was not terribly impressed with. I see Flemings all over the country. It's just like the rest of their stores. Where I'm going with this is that when the ARB reviews new buildings, we look at the whole building. We look at the entire structure. We look at it from the inside outside. When the Campus for Jewish Life was built, we did not ignore what happened on the interior of that complex of buildings. We looked at the whole complex. And for every project that we look at the entire structure. And so there are a number of places where I feel that this project sort of fails. One is that there's no overall defining character for this set of 4 buildings. Now, you had indicated in the beginning of your presentation that this is really the first step of a major overhaul of the shopping center. But if that is the case, what this board really needs to look at is in context with the rest of the shopping center and what is intended for the entire shopping center in order to get a clear picture of what is going to be accomplished with this set of buildings. So that's the first area that I think that it really needs to be looked at. When I look at the specific details of the buildings themselves, the least successful area, I think, is the alley or the walkway between the buildings where you've got these display cases. Where I believe they fail is that they are not genuine pieces of architecture. It has degraded to becoming nothing more than display windows. Now, I understand your problems there with regard to firewalls and fire separations and all those other requirements. However, the pedestrian experience, I think, falls short there and does not rise to the occasion of a high-quality shopping center. It's merely a pathway to get from point A to point B. So how do you make that a better experience? There's landscaping, there's seating, opportunities, there are fountains. You could undulate the space, you can make it wider so you don't need to have those fire separations. And that's what you started to do by creating that that oval or that pavilion in the I want to say bull ring, but that's not right. It was like an oval in the beginning of when these buildings were originally proposed, because you got the separation, you began to have something exciting there, and you minimized the length of these corridors, and so people could walk through there and then be surprised by an event or something happening, a point of arrival. And I think that that's sort of lost. So I have great difficulty in terms of approving this today. It's very sad for me because as far as I'm concerned, this is my last hearing here And so I was hoping to be more forward and forthcoming and being able to approve it, but I don't see how I can do that. So with that, we'll return to Board Member Liu, and you might have some other questions or comments that you wish to make.
I do not think I have any other. I do not have any other comments.
Board Member Guyer?
I'm fine right now.
Okay. Vice Chair Pop?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this project today. And the motion will include the conditions of approval and in particular, item number 7 within those conditions for items to return to ARB subcommittee. I won't list all of those, but they're noted there. And I would like to include in my motion that the initial review of the bicycle parking occur within 4 months of the opening. I think a year is too long to wait, and once the standard is set for how hard it is to park in that area, if you're bringing a bike, people will be frustrated. So I'd like to include that, but otherwise, I'm prepared to support this project today.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Do you wish to speak to that, to your motion, to your second?
I'm fine.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'd just like to add to that, which is that I think that bicycle parking is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you build it, people will use it. If you don't build it, people will attach their bicycles to no parking signs and other objects. That it's really crucial if you want people to take it seriously. You really need to provide visible bicycle parking in a variety of locations. And that's the only way that people will know that they should ride their bikes there. So I'm in support of what Board Member Pop has recommended in terms of looking at it 4 months after opening. And in addition to that, I believe that, you know, the rest of the bicycle parking should come online with the renovation of the shopping center. That they should increase the amount of, you know, some of it can be held in reserve, but it should actually all be completed by the time the shopping center is fully renovated. So that's my feeling about it. I'm not looking at it to make a friendly motion because I'm going to vote against this motion. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, with that, we will vote on the motion. All those in support of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? And we have 1 abstention. Thank you very much for your time. And we will move on to item number 2. Ms. Atkinson, will you please on your way out get Board Member Malone Pritchard and have her come back in? Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item number 2, new business, 430 Forest Avenue, request by David Solnick on behalf of Sage Leaf Forest LLC for preliminary architectural review of a 13-unit multifamily development proposal to replace an existing commercial building, AAA office, and including a 2-story townhouse building containing 2 condominium units and a 3-story building containing 2 condominium units and 10 rental units on a 0.52 acre site located in the RM40 zone district. And if you would like to introduce the project, please.
Yes, I'm going to introduce the staff person to my left. This is Christy Fong, who comes to us since June, mid-June. She's one of 3 new staff people. You met Matt yesterday, you met Rebecca last ARB meeting, and now you're meeting Christy. So I'll let her describe the project.
Good morning, board member. The applicant for 430 Forest Avenue is requesting for preliminary architectural comments regarding the proposal to replace an existing one-story office building with a two-story townhome and a three-story multifamily building. The two-story townhome will contain 2 residential units located at the rear side of the property. The three-story multifamily building will contain 11 residential units located at the front facing Forest Avenue. The multifamily building will have 5 residential units on the ground floor, 5 residential units on the second floor, and 1 penthouse unit on the third floor. The project is also providing 2 covered parking spaces for each of the townhome units and 1 level of underground parking with 27 parking spaces for the multifamily building. Staff requests board feedback on the proposed design and massing. This project is located within the RM40 zoning district. The front yard setback requirement range from 0 to 25 feet. Minimum setback requirement shall be determined by the ARBs upon review with the considerations of the context-based criteria. The applicant is here today to answer any question you may have. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. So, wow, David Solnick, welcome. You will have 10 minutes to make your presentation, at which time we will have questions from the board. Then we will open the public hearing, and then we will return to the board for their comments, and hopefully, well, there won't be any action today. So.
Okay, I note the, Christy asked if I wanted to do a PowerPoint, and I remembered how it was impossible to see PowerPoints when I was here, and now I see you've got something that's higher tech and much more visible. But anyway, I don't have a PowerPoint. You know, as you know, most of you know me already, and I, you know, the one who doesn't, I've always been a very strong proponent of dense downtowns, and have had the good luck to do a number of houses here, and including some houses and some small multifamily projects in the downtown, both for clients, as in this case, and on my own. I've also had the very good fortune of working with Caroline Chen for most of those years, who is here as well. And I'll be introducing my client in a second. The site is zoned RM40, which is Palo Alto's highest density residential zoning, and hence my personal favorite. We're requesting no exceptions to that zoning and no exceptions to the parking regulations. We're proposing, as was described, a 13-unit residential project to replace a legal but non-conforming office building. The AAA, which, by the way, owned and sold this to my client. They're not a tenant being displaced. The program mixes for sale and for rent housing types, a bit unusual across 2 buildings. The rear building is 2-story duplex with side-by-side townhouses with their own garages. The front building is 3-story and is 10 apartments with a penthouse on top and shared parking underground. This program is sort of reflected in the massing, and to go along with Palo Alto's sort of density gradient. Obviously, it's denser as you get closer to university, less dense as you move away, and our site mirrors that. So it's, and also the housing types tend to change, more house-like as you move away, more denser as you move towards. So, you know, on our lot, in microcosm, that's true as well. We have apartments closer to university at 3-story, and then townhomes in the back that are 2-story. So it's sort of mirroring that native gradient, density gradient. Aside from its great downtown location, a big asset of the site is a large and beautiful live oak tree on the left edge. We've taken, the trunk is actually in the neighbor's yard, but it you know, clearly positively impacts ours substantially. We've taken a lot of care to keep our building and the underground parking garage even farther away from the tree than our arborister initially recommended. And we've used the environment created by that tree as the site for our common open space. To a little aside, a more prosaic aside, the transformer. I hate to go from beautiful trees and just jump right into a transformer. But there's a new regulation, which you're probably aware of, which is the charging stations. There's one charging station required for each dwelling unit. That adds a great deal to the electrical load of the project. That in turn substantially increases the size of the transformer required. There's already a large transformer there, which you might have seen if you've been there. It's not big enough. The utilities department doesn't like transformers to be anywhere but above ground. So it's not prohibited to put them underground, but we would like to do so, in particular under the driveway. And I'm hoping that your recommendation will, if not at this hearing, then a subsequent one will support that possibility. A large transformer in the front yard, in the small front yard, would not benefit. I don't think would benefit anybody. I won't repeat items that are already in the narrative and that you're here. I never liked that when I was on the ARB. So instead, I will turn this over to my client, Prabhash Kejriwal. I'm sure I'm destroying his last name, and he might fire me because of that. To talk about the project's sustainability. We have a long history of designing sustainably. Our project, sort of catty corner across the street, was one of the first spec developments with solar panels. But to be frank, we've been out-greened by our client on this one. He's pushing us quite hard on this, to his credit, and so I think he should be the one that tells you about some of those features.
If you could just introduce yourself.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Prabhash Kejriwal. I'm one of the two owners of this project, two partners of this project. We have done few single-family homes in Palo Alto about 10 to 12 years ago, and we have.
Could you speak closer to the mic, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. So we've done a few single-family homes in Palo Alto about 10 years ago, and we have done a similar size project to this proposed projects in Mountain View in 2007, 2008. So we have experience kind of doing this kind of projects. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, by training, and so building construction is not my day job. It's kind of a hobby in a way. This energy efficiency and sustainability is kind of very dear to me, and I have done a lot of kind of research on this subject on my own. And so we try to kind of push the technology envelope on this, see whatever is feasible, technologically feasible, we want to kind of do it, because we don't want to look at as traditionally builders do, at the first cost, right? We want to look at the life cycle cost and life cycle benefits of the project. So we have started from the envelope. We're trying to do the best envelope we can, and of course the new Title 24 kind of pushes us to do that, but we have gone beyond that in terms of the envelope material selection, the wall and the windows selection. Then secondly, we have gone into the systems, the building systems, gone and kind of chosen the kind of top of the line in terms of efficiency. We have, for example, the VRF heat pump systems for heating and cooling. We have 90, kind of condensing water heaters, and yeah, basically everything, everything higher efficiency. And then on top of that, we're going to lighting, for example, planning to use all LED lightings because the technology is there now. It's mature enough so that we can kind of do that. We are able to do that. And also, we're going to use the wide use of controls to make it, because it's okay to put high efficient equipment, but not able to do the, to control, for example, make wide use of lighting sensors, illumination, day lighting sensors and occupancy sensors to turn off things when there's no occupancy, things like this. So while doing all this, going for LEED wasn't an initial goal, but we thought since we are doing all these things, kind of, why not get a LEED? And it looks like we are able to get a LEED Platinum. Another thing, we're going to use the gray water harvesting so that all the landscaping will be self-sustained. It won't need any additional kind of water from the city. Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we'll have some questions, and then we will open the public hearing, and then we'll return to the board for comments. We will begin with Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Thanks for bringing this forward as a preliminary. Enjoyed actually going out to the site and taking a look at that street, because that's a section of forest I don't often go down. I think that the particular type of project you're proposing here is a great fit for the neighborhood. My questions are small. One is that the surgical center to the right of the project has some windows facing towards your project. It looked to me as though those were obscured. Is that correct?
That theirs are obscured? Yeah, that's my memory of it, although I didn't look specifically at that. We often obscure, our windows are not, that are shown are not necessarily clear either, and we do that in a we generally have done that, we always have done that in a very site-specific way, even after the building is framed, choosing which ones to obscure and which ones not.
Yeah, because that was my next question. Looking at that side of the surge center is not particularly attractive, so right. How are you dealing with that?
Well, fortunately, it's not very tall.
Yeah. And then my other question has to do with the southwest side, which again is facing the surge center. Have you looked at all at providing additional shading for those windows? I see that you have roof overhangs, but you also have very long windows.
For the ground floor?
Yes.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we did make a concerted effort to reduce as much as possible the windows on that side because of the the western. That's probably the side that gets blasted the most. We didn't produce any shading, and our we have overhangs of course above, but we didn't have any overhangs below. I don't know whether because of the proximity of that building it'll be as critical as it might if it were not there. You're talking about shading for solar impact, right? Yeah, that's something we should study more carefully in a section, I would say, a site section.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll do that as you continue with the project.
Board Member Guyer.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Board Member Liu.
So welcome back.
Thank you.
The ARB is
nice
not
to be back.
Yeah, the ARB is not the same without you on the board.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'll
yes.
take it as a compliment.
I know. That's just it just is. So thank you for bringing this as a preliminary. I think you're sort of like the master of these little, whatever you call it, the little puzzles of trying to.
Caroline and I.
Yeah, somebody's a master of this because it's, and you guys are very good at it. And I think my main concern about the project is the sort of, I would call it like the portico share, the two-story space that sits over the driveway. Mm-hmm. Mostly because it's on the north side and it's going to shade the lower floor units. So you've got like north-facing units which get less light anyway, and then you're having this big thing over there. Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I understand why you've got it there, and it creates a roof terrace for the penthouse and gives you bedrooms.
There's more to why that is one reason why it's there, but not the only reason.
Okay.
And actually, it's one of my, not so many, believe it or not so many gripes about this zoning, but one of them is the site coverage limitation. It really limits what you can put on the ground floor. And I think it's counterproductive to everybody because, of course, it requires the buildings to be more
taller.
You have to, if you can't put it down, you either don't do it, which, as you know, developers buy things on the basis of the square footage that can be put there, and you can't put enough on the ground floor, so you have to put it up. So in this case, we tend to design by sort of ignoring the site coverage, going about our business, and then going back and look at it. And we were over, and obviously we're very careful about the FAR, but we were over on the FAR by a few hundred square feet in doing that, and so had to put more upstairs, even having that second floor, a couple of rooms. And we really had no other place to put it. But it wasn't, I shouldn't say it was that, random. It was, that also is serving as a sort of privacy move to the back. So you go under this bridge, through the driveway to get to the back. So it adds to the sort of separation between the front building and the rear building, which are two very different types. And so it's contributing to that privacy. But I would much have preferred that the site coverage was not so restricted. The FAR restriction is fine, but if the site coverage wasn't so restrictive, it might have been a little different project. We've had this problem on pretty much every one we've done.
And I think of having like some sort of gateway is potentially like a nice design feature, right? I mean, I think like falling water has that kind of thing where you sort of go through a trellised area to get to the back. But then on this particular one, it's kind of strange is that you go through, like you're going through the apartment building to get back, and you get back to the townhouses, which is like a little strange. Like conceptually, it doesn't quite make sense to me. So why don't I move on? I think you have the mechanical room like sitting below the driveway, and is that just for?
The label of I wouldn't take too seriously the label of mechanical. We don't really have anything mechanical that needs to go there.
That was the transformer you're thinking of.
The transformer and the transformer could actually go under the drive. Wouldn't necessarily be in here. It could actually be under the driveway.
Okay, that's fine. I was just thinking of like venting and stuff.
Yeah, that was sort of a default label.
And then the public art, site for public art, you're showing in sort of next to the driveway. And I was wondering if you had considered something kind of more integral with the building, like on the stair tower or whatnot.
I didn't consider something more integral. We did. I mean, I like the idea of the artist having the freedom of not having to, sort of make it compatible with the building. I mean, I think there's some advantages to that, and also it being sort of a gift to the public that it's not, that constraint shouldn't necessarily be imposed. We did consider it, the other site that we considered was as being sort of a focal point in the common open space, which, which I think, it has the disadvantages. It's a little farther from the, from the right of way. It has the advantage that it might, get enjoyed in a more, sort of in a quiet, more long-lasting way. But it's, but no, we really didn't consider putting it on the building. Yeah, just kind of for those reasons.
And it depends on what the artwork is. Anything.
And there's not a lot of, we don't have a large front yard here, and so it's, I'll give it some space.
Okay, why don't we move on?
Okay, Vice Chair Pop.
I don't have any questions at this point, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit about your exterior materials?
A little bit, but we don't have a material board yet, and we haven't settled, and we haven't settled on the colors. Although, these colors are not, it's not going to be purple and green. I mean, these colors are probably in concept what they'll be, what they'll feel like. The wood, and they do represent wood. They are meant to represent wood and stucco. The wood, I suppose my bias at the moment is to have the wood be redwood. And the stucco, we've always done a sort of smooth hand wrought stucco, where you really see the craftsman's, it's one of the few materials left where you can actually see where people worked it, well, depending on how you apply it, but it can still be applied reasonably economically and have that feeling. So that's the intent without nailing down the specific colors.
Have you looked at any more sustainable sort of materials? I mean, redwood, has an aging characteristic to it. If it's not maintained, this is multifamily. Have you looked at other alternative materials?
Well, I certainly have thought about, there are wood, there's hardy kinds of things which probably are more sustainable. Although with redwood, I mean, on some of our projects, we actually have used remilled 2x6 decking. And it comes out quite beautifully because they mill it so that the face that ends up on the outside was on the inside. Or you get two pieces out of a 2x6 and it's
Right.
So that's a very sustainable way to do that. There's still the weathering issue. I agree. Although, when I was on the ARB, there was a project that came up. I just rode by it just now on, must have been on Bryant, and maybe between Lytton and University, or between Everett and Lytton.
I think the Ken Hayes.
It's a Ken Hayes, and it was an all wood building that was in very bad shape. And he was redoing it, and he redid it with all wood. And I was rather vocal about, you got to be kidding. I mean, it's got a big southern exposure, full-blown southern exposure, and it had weathered very badly. And he was very adamant about, well, no, not with the stuff we're putting on there. And I have to say, he was right. So I think it can be done if you use, as far as the longevity issue, with the right treatment.
Okay, and then for multifamily housing, when you build more than 10 or more units, you're now required to work on the placement of solar. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
To work on the placement of solar?
Yeah, you're supposed to accommodate for future installation of solar panels.
We're putting in solar panels.
Okay.
The whole, yeah, they're actually shown in the model. This is going to be a net zero for electrical, even though both the heating and air conditioning will be electrical. It's still going to be net zero.
Okay.
I'm not misstating that, right? And you use a former electrical engineer. He's done a lot of calculations. Yeah.
Okay, and then with regard to, you're surrounded by a number of historic properties. Any thought with regard to those properties in your...
You're not referring to the one I did across the street, right?
Yeah, no, you're surrounded, I mean, literally on almost four sides by historic properties.
I saw in the staff report that the existing building might have some, I guess there's going to be a historic report about that. I suppose I could say that you're talking about the office buildings, I presume. Primarily.
No, there's
and also the Downing house down the street. Yeah.
Yeah, there's Downing House. There's St. Thomas Aquinas Parish. They own 3 properties there. They're all deemed historic. You've got historic houses across the street.
Well, I mean, I certainly don't. I certainly didn't see any commonality among the historic houses in the neighborhood, and certainly not something that we would pick up on directly. I mean, I think what we've done here is, in some ways, a fusion of their intents, in that those buildings that you're mentioning are of a pretty fine grain. They're not sort of like some of the office buildings, which are tend to be more big moves in the massing. Ours are very residential moves, which are in keeping with those. On the other hand, they are flat roofs, so that they do have some of the contextualism of the commercial buildings that are still there, the one next door and the one, of course, it's replacing, and the one and the surgery center to the left. So it's kind of got a foot in each. I'm certainly not claiming that it's a historical, it's not a historical house, attempting to do that, and that's not something that we don't think that flatters. To do that would flatter what's there. But I think the massing is sort of a bridge between those two types of existing buildings.
Okay, we'll pause here and open the public hearing. If there are members of the public that wish to speak to this item, you may do so at this time. Sure. If you could identify yourself and then simply fill out a speaker card when you're finished. You'll have 3 minutes.
Should I do it? Okay, hi. My name is Mike Egbert. I live at 457 Homer Avenue. Homer 457 is what is just across the fence behind this whole complex. I know it'll sound somewhat cliche to say that this all looks great, but not in my backyard, but it literally is my backyard. I've got the end unit in the very back of the Cedar Terrace complex. That end unit has a little bit of space. It's got a fence, and over the fence is the parking lot where this is going to be constructed. Our unit's set down about 3 to 4 feet. So when I sit at my kitchen table, I look out, I look up, I see the fence, and I see blue sky. And that really is the primary light that we get in our complex. The kitchen window, it's a big bay window where we eat breakfast, and the kitchen sink. And then we have 2 upstairs bedrooms right above that, all north facing, and it's literally the only light that we get. Based on the way this is setting up, I'll sit at my kitchen window, I'll look up into someone's deck, someone else's bedroom. They'll have the ability to look down into mine nonstop. Privacy goes away, light goes away. It'll literally be blocking out the sun. The other things that I worry about, obviously, with a complex this size, with 10 rental units, noise. Haven't done any studies on what happens to crime from that situation, but it'll change the dynamic of the reason we bought here 10 years ago and the limited privacy we do have at this particular stage. I guess if I were to say one other thing, I think that the concept of density is a great idea if you're a developer. But I continue to hate to see downtown Palo Alto turn into an anthill with people on top of each other. And we are in a situation where we will literally have people on top of us. With a 10-foot setback, with balconies coming out that side, the minute we walk out our door, we'll be looking up into other people's lives. They'll be looking down into ours. So I'm not just raising concern, but registering disapproval for the whole idea of the way it's set up is how it'll impact me specifically and my family. We're in a unique situation because it literally is on top of us with no space. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could fill out a speaker card and just hand it to one of the staff members. If there are any other members of the public that wish to speak, same thing. Just introduce yourself and fill out a speaker card when you're finished, please. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Vin Diep. I live right next to Mike's unit, so needless to say, I'm also very concerned about this project. Our unit is a little bit up higher, the 2nd and 3rd floor. Mike is on the 1st unit, so our windows is a little bit higher than his. So out looking, we have the kitchen window, the nuke, and also 2 bedroom. That's basically in line with the townhouse that's going to be there. So. And us also, we're north facing as well, so most of our light is coming from that end, so we're really concerned about having the townhouse up so high, blocking all the views and the light, and obviously all the privacy that goes with that as well. And as Mike said, we moved in here for a reason. The area of the entrance to our unit right now is pretty open. We enjoyed a pretty wide space, nice blue sky, and a great view to the oak that's currently there right now. So with this elevation going up, it's definitely going to impact all that, and we're very concerned about that. So we'd like to see what can be done to improve this a little bit better. Not totally object to this program, but we'd like to make sure that all things is considered for our sake. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could just fill out a speaker card and hand it to one of the staff members. Okay, any other members of the public? Okay, you've had your presentation. What we'll do is we're not going to take any action, but at the close, I'll allow you to have a 5-minute rebuttal, and you can address any comments that we have as well as members of the public. So with that, I will close the public hearing, and we'll return to the board for our comments and any other questions. There is no action. So, Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Yeah, actually, can you speak to us a little bit about views into the rear neighbor and whether or not there is an alternative location for that rear deck from the townhomes?
I certainly do understand the concerns, and I think they're something that that it's important for us to address as we develop this. I should just want to point out that the height of this building at the back is 20 and a half feet. The whole back of the townhouse is 20 and a half feet, 2-story, which is about half of the 40-foot height limit. So it, obviously it could be a whole lot taller, but which we certainly don't want to make it any taller. So are you referring? I think you're referring to the deck off of TH, the second townhouse. Yeah, that must be.
Yeah, it's on TH rear on the elevations.
Right. Certainly, we struggle with getting, outdoors, those townhouses, the neighbors do have some nice outdoor space, and we obviously struggle with getting outdoor space for these, and obviously some is required. Do we have to have it on the second floor? Probably not. It's probably, it's a deck off a master, so, probably not a very heavily used deck, as opposed to one that would be off of a kitchen, dining, living. So I guess you could argue that would cut both ways, would have less impact on the neighbor, but might be more expendable. Maybe it could be more within the sort of U shape of the building rather than extending beyond. That sort of sounds like where you might be coming from. And I can see that as a possibility.
Okay, that's something I would encourage you to study as you bring the project forward. And in addition, I'm sure you'll be doing sections through both properties to illustrate heights and window locations, et cetera. That will be an important element for the compatibility. A couple of elevations had some blank areas on them. Wanted to see what you were thinking about that. Let's see, it was one was the rear elevation of the apartments. Is that right? No, that's the rear elevation of the townhomes. Hang on. Okay, right elevation of the apartments. There's a sort of a big block, which I believe is the stair. Yeah. Is labeled.
Yes, that's right.
Right
so that's
elevation.
the one in the sort of the blank, sort of 3-story blank with a tall, thin window.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. That's the stair. So there is a window in the stair. Mm-hmm. That's but not.
Which is good.
It's not as many as you.
But I'm wondering whether you might celebrate the stair a little bit more and make it a little bit more inviting by actually glazing it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing about the stair that faces the front of the building as well. That faces the street.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that stair does have windows in it as well. As also, by the way, there's windows to the interior, which is part of the philosophy of encouraging people to take the stairs and not take the elevator, and it's right there at the elevator. I guess I'm somewhat ambivalent about that. I'm a strong believer in contrast. And I think having a small amount of a blank area, and of course there's a planter there, so that won't, there will be plants growing right up that wall. I think that in some ways actually enhances the pretty substantial glazing of the rest, and that if it gets too, sort of equally glazed the whole thing, I think it actually gets less. It's less impactful. Obviously, I wouldn't want the stair to be dark, but I think it's got corner windows to the exterior and also, like I said, windows to the interior. So I don't think it will be dark.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that thinking. There does need to be some point and counterpoint there. Generally thinking that the massing and scale of this building is very much appropriate for the neighborhood. I don't have a problem with the historic buildings around and this being more modern next to it. It's replacing a very modern building, and a lot of the apartment buildings across the street from it are actually flat tops from the early 20th century. So I think it fits in well with the neighborhood. So I think my biggest concern would be look at the impacts on the neighbors and show the sections through the neighboring properties just to really demonstrate whether or not it's compatible. Otherwise, I would fully support the project.
Thank you.
Board Member Guyer?
Yeah, I have I have a problem with sort of the whole layout of the project, where I have a hard time assuming that someone's going to want to buy one of these 2 units in the back when you're basically driving through a 12-foot driveway that's 150 plus feet long to get to 4 parking spaces in the back, and basically you're driving underneath and if you want to call it an adjacent apartment complex. I don't know if those are going to be a real saleable item for somebody wanting to do that. It just seems like the way it's laid out, there's a whole lot of hardscape that could be landscaping if the thing was arranged a little differently. From the street, it's the old thing. I live, behind the apartment complex. If you're telling somebody where you live, I just have a hard time with it. I have to commend your, aim to go for LEED. I think that, or I should say for LEED Platinum. I think that's marvelous. But the layout doesn't really work for me. Also, this type of, I don't know whether you want to call it mid-century modern or whatever, I think works very well on a small scale, and I think it's been done very nicely in a lot of examples in the city. But on a scale of this size, it's much tougher to carry off, And my initial look, when I looked at the elevations, almost struck me as some of the old 1950s schools that I've seen when I was a kid. I have a hard time seeing the residential aspect of this. It looks too much like an apartment complex, and like I said, I don't know if whether the 1 unit on top becomes the owner of the apartment units underneath it. I don't know, but it's just that the way the whole project is put together, I have a problem with. And I don't know, I've always been told you don't come up here and tell you how to design the thing. I'm just telling you my reaction to what I see here.
Board Member Liu?
I have the same reaction as you when I look at the elevations. Right? And then when I look at David's 3D SketchUp things, I always have a completely different reaction, because he actually does a lot of 3-dimensional pushing and pulling of the mass there that I don't think you see in the elevations quite as much. That you don't see in the elevations as much. But it's also interesting too is that we have like around Homer and Forest, we've had a whole bunch of small unit projects, maybe like 3 or 4 units, and they're units, front, middle, and back, and whatnot. And I've looked at all of them, like when they come on the market, and I'm amazed at how fast they sell, and the prices that they sell at. And also in just personal anecdote, like my parents were in the market for something downtown, and it's incredibly competitive. They looked for a whole year before they gave up and moved to a different neighborhood. there's just an incredible demand. And then I think that just puts the burden, though, is that the design really, nevertheless, the design has to be really good. So, and I think I share some of your concerns. Just when I do look at the elevations, they do seem fairly big. Like, I think that David, you're very good at handling material changes and whatnot. And I think that on this particular case, with the long wall of the apartment building, that you have to do even more than you normally do to break up the mass, just because it's bigger than the other projects that you've done. But I would say I'm generally in support of the project. I do have some reservations about the bump out, as I mentioned before. And I do need to see more context. And I think like a SketchUp, the 3D view of the back so that the neighbors can see what the project looks like from their perspective is critically important. And you can sort of try to include the tree so that we have sort of the larger view of the back of the project. And I think that's all that I have to say on this particular one. So yeah, we can move on.
Vice Chair Pop. Mr. Solnick, thank you very much for bringing this forward as a preliminary. I think this is always a great opportunity for us to give early feedback and help guide a project. And in this case, I think we're looking at a pretty nice project here. Very much like the direction this is going and the general site organization that you have. I want to address some of the comments that I heard from the public. I do think it's critical that we consider the issues of light and noise and all of those things. That said, you're within the zoning. You're less than the zoning requires in that area. You're below the limit. You're within the setbacks. I think outreach to the neighbors is important. Get yourself a couple of solar studies so they can see how the light will be affected by your building. I think that Board Member Malone Pritchard's comments about the rear balcony are appropriate, and perhaps a low privacy wall, so when someone's sitting on that balcony, there's privacy. But if you're walking around out there, I think this zone has been in place for a long time. And I would encourage anyone who purchases a property to study the properties around them and consider what may happen in the future, and to expect that your context won't change over time. I'm sorry, that's unreasonable. And so I think what needs to happen here is for there to be dialogue and for there to be some sharing of information, and as much as you can be considerate of their concerns and try and react. I think there's always opportunity to place windows and to create obscure glass and to organize a building in a way that minimizes impact. But to remove impact, I think, is not something that should be expected. The issue of the transformer, since that was one of the first things you brought up, I'll bring it up rapidly here as well. Unintended consequences, right? I think that everybody appreciates the direction that the new regulations are taking, and that it's the right thing to do to encourage people to provide for charging stations. But when we see the rubber hit the road and we realize that we need a much larger transformer and all these other consequences, the utilities department just needs to understand that they're going to have to change their rules. They're going to have to rethink how they work, and I'm going to ask staff to really interact with the utilities department and make it very clear that above ground exposed transformers are not going to be possible in every case, now that they have to be likely more frequent and certainly larger. And I think it's very important in this particular case to get the transformer below grade the way you're describing. I would very much support that direction and almost obligated. I think this is a great example of a Solnick building. We've got quite a few of these in town, and unfortunately, you're away, and so you don't hear our discussions, but we often cite your buildings as a good example of design, and encourage applicants to take a look at them and to emulate some of the details and the character. Hope you don't mind that. Not necessarily to copy the way a few of them have, but to use them as a guide. That said, this is a larger building than most of the other examples that you've done, and I think there are some challenges associated with that. I would include my comment in the concern about larger blank walls, articulation of the building. For me, it's a little too monotonal. I think only 2 materials is not enough, and I think that on a building of this size, you need more detail to break it up. I'm looking forward to the SketchUp models and understanding how the building moves in and out and changes shape and all of those things, but I think that there's not enough going on here for me yet in some ways. In other ways, it's almost a little too much going on, all these different windows, not necessarily all organized, lining up. Part of the character. I think that's part of the charm of the building, is that it's got a little bit of variety going on, but to me it's almost it needs a little restraint in its organization, and so I'll look forward to the refinement of this as it comes forward and we see it again. Board Member Liu's comment about the porte cochere and the pop out, as he's describing it, over the driveway, I think is very appropriate. I'd like to see you, rather than that just being a box that sticks out there with a deck on top of it, do something more with it. I think that's the opportunity for public art. I think that's the place where it should be. It should wrap around that. It should celebrate that. It should do something to almost call attention to it rather than try and minimize it. Do something special with that. Just plopping a sculpture out on the street, to me, is less interesting than doing something that might actually integrate with the building. We've seen sculpture recently that represents address signage. There are lots of ways to integrate it with the architecture, and I appreciate your comments about giving it back to the public and wanting it to be an object, but I actually think integrating it with the building would be more interesting to me and more appropriate. That's really all I have today. I'm very excited about the net zero component of this. I think that's a really admirable goal, and I think that we'll all learn something watching this project and how it moves forward into that goal and hopefully succeeding in that. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming forward with a preliminary. For all of you that don't know, David is my former neighbor, and in fact, I had encouraged him to be on the Architectural Review Board, and I want to thank you for your service when you were. This is a very exciting project. It's really a terrific project to have as my last prelim, so to speak, one of my last prelims. And I think Vice Chair Pop is correct. Whenever we look at multifamily housing, we very often, cite your projects throughout the city simply because they're so well executed and the way they fit into neighborhoods. So, often copied, very rarely, often imitated, very rarely copied, but they are ones that we use as examples all the time. And what comes to mind is, if you've ever been to Lugano, Switzerland, that's where Mario Botta's from. You go through Lugano, you walk through, and you go Mario Botta building, Mario Botta building, Mario Botta building, and then you go, not Mario Botta. He's often copied, but we're imitated, but they're not able to get the quality and the detailing. The challenge I have for you on this project is that I think this building in particular should go to the next level. I'm very excited about the configuration, the layout. I think you're spot on in terms of the configuration towards the lower buildings being towards the back of the property where it abuts these neighbors. But the material palette, I think, needs to be further developed and go to the next level. And what I'm thinking of is that there are so many historic properties that are, houses that are adjacent to it, that maybe elements of this building need to take their cues from some of the adjacent buildings. There are buildings with horizontal siding. There are buildings with vertical siding. There are buildings with cladding on them. There are details. I'm not saying apply those details, but maybe there's a contemporary version of those details that you could come up with in railings and specifically. So I think that there's a great opportunity to actually gesture to these historic properties without wholesale copying, the style of the building. And it's such a big complex of buildings that it could support a variety of materials, textures, and different repeating of elements there. So that's my challenge for you on this project. I like what you've done with the porte cochere. I'm very excited about the fact that this block or this element is overhanging. And in some ways, I wish that there was more of that, but I think for this first go around, I think it's appropriate and I like it. And overall, I think it's just a terrific project. So good luck with it, and I'm sorry that I won't be here for the final review. So with that, any other comments here? Would you like to make some closing remarks or comments here?
No, not really. I mean, there was definitely some useful feedback in that, and which is the whole reason that we're here. So.
Great. And the reason I missed the solar panels, by the way, is that they're on such a low pitch or angle that they're only really visible. I saw them in the illustrations. I mean, you don't even see them. So.
Purely accidental.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Obviously that was intentional. We don't want people to walk by and think, oh, right, that's solar panels. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, we will move on now to the last agenda item. We have a study session. We're skipping item number 3, 1050 Page Mill Road. That's been continued to November the 20th. So if you're here for this item, it's not happening today. Study session, item number 4, 450 Bryant Street, presentation of site constraints and concepts for a substantial interior model of a 5,000 square foot addition to an existing city-owned building currently leased to Avenida Senior Center, Zone, Public Facilities, PF, Environmental Assessment. No action will be taken on this project, and a study session is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act. So if you would like to introduce the project, Amy?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm actually trying to, I'm not sure exactly how to work the, I was trying to get the applicant's PowerPoint presentation up.
Looks like, yeah,
I can't see the screen.
You could bring the mouse up with you too, near the screen if you want. That's what I do. So just while Rebecca is loading the presentation, I'll just say yesterday we conducted a noticed public hearing site visit with the HRB, and the ARB members were invited, and 3 of you came. Board Member Pop, Board Member Malone Richard, Board Member Liu, and I thought it was an interesting approach to seeing what's there, hearing some of the constraints, but the applicant is here as well to present those constraints, and I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Great, thank you for holding this study session. Did we want to remain at the, or were people going to come?
No, I think it's fine. Sometimes we've come down to this area, but it's fine with study session here, subcommittees here. But since we do have a presentation up there.
That's great. Thank you. This project came in for, as an application back in September, and staff has provided feedback and review of the conceptual project plans. And this, as Amy mentioned, that this project went before the HRB for a study session yesterday, and to you for a study session. The feedback that the applicant was mostly interested in learning about was that any early feedback that you have on the project, as well as considerations of opportunities and constraints. The applicant has a brief presentation, and then I'd like to continue on in hearing from ARB members. Thank you.
So Kevin, this is a prelim. You'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and then we'll just return to the board for questions, open the public hearing, and then we will return to the board for any additional questions and comments.
Very good, thank you. I'm Kevin Jones with Kenneth Rodriguez and Partners, architects. I greatly appreciate those of you who were able to take part in our site visit yesterday, and I will try to reiterate some of the topics we discussed yesterday to those of you who were not available. Avenidas operates out of Burge Clark Building at 450 Bryant Street. The existing facility there houses a number of functions for Avenidas. That includes their administrative aspects, as well as a multitude of classes that serve the public, as well as a lunch program operate out of the facility. Over the course of a number of years, we have been evaluating the demand for services at that location and how we can meet that growing demand. And so for about an 8-year period, there has been some discussion amongst the board and other members of the organization about how could we expand our facility to meet the growing need of the continually growing, aging Palo Alto population, of which about 1/3 of the population is over the age 50, 55. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we have been trying to put a plan to action about how we could go and do this. Avenidas is a nonprofit organization, and much of what we do as a result of fundraising opportunities by our donorship. And any addition that we are considering here would be funded largely by the support of our donors. So it would necessitate a capital campaign to allow for us to do this addition. So I'll try to go through this fairly quickly here, because our interest really is hearing comments and feedback from the board today. This talks a little bit about the background of Avenidas, the people that we serve here in the city, some of the offerings, a variety of classes and lectures. Health screenings are provided in the facility. Social work services are provided there. Informational assistance for caregivers in terms of the variety of other organizations that provide services to the senior population. Transportation services. Volunteer opportunities. We have a number of volunteers that do everything from early literacy, also as well as volunteering in the facility itself. I mentioned the La Comida dining component, which does a lunch program during 5 days during the week. The project is located on, I think, referred to as sort of public park. It's adjacent to the Bryant Street, is one street face. We're adjacent to the park, and I think it's Emerson on the back, and just 1 block off of University Avenue, between it and Linton, across the street from the large-scale parking structure. The building originally was constructed in 1926. It's a Burge Clark building. It was constructed as the Palo Alto Police and Fire building, I guess. Part of the building to the left was the police component, and to the right was the fire component. And actually, in the police component, there were some actual jail cells, and I understand there was a court up on the upper floor, so you could be tried, convicted, and sentenced and incarcerated all in the same location. Much of the existing building remains in pretty good condition. Over the course of a number of years, there have been a couple additions added onto it, which I'll demonstrate here in a moment. This is the entry to the La Comida dining hall from the rear courtyard at the back of the facility off of the rear parking area. There's the rear parking area, and you can now sort of see these two other little elements that we'll talk about here in a second. So the main Burge Clark building is the main square rectangular box. A little L-shaped piece was an addition that was added back in around 1970s, is that piece. And this is another piece of this has, and a lot of what we've done to date has been trying to get our constituency to understand the need and desire for this addition, and then trying to give them some visuals about what it can be. So we really are at an early point, despite some of the developed graphics that I'm showing you today. The other piece is this addition from the 50s, which is a carriage house building. We currently use it as a conference room, but this is viewed from the back of the parcel, and this fundamentally is the area where we're talking about expanding a new addition. The concept is to increase the building by about 5,000 square feet of an addition that would sit within this courtyard area. These little red pieces are intended to be, I'm trying to build for you, at least in concept, how the addition would be conceived. These reds are these sort of connector pieces that would be sort of glass elements that would hopefully sort of touch lightly to the existing building and allow for a transition to another addition or a different sort of architectural style. The main Burge Clark building, the exterior is not intended to be modified. Much of the interior will be modified, but none of the historic fabric remains in the existing building. So these connectors, let me kind of zoom through here. The purple box is the concept for an atrium area. Our users are like the courtyard, but in the challenge of dealing with space, we've needed to build over that area, but we're looking to try to create a two-story sort of atrium element to provide a concept of openness and providing light into the space based on this atrium concept. And then there is one last piece of this, which is really the 5,000 square feet, which we're adding, which is this other piece here in green, which all links together to kind of create this infill that would sit behind the existing Burge Clark building and be what we would constitute as a new addition. One of the things that we've quickly realized is that as soon as we would do this, we are pretty much maximizing that space. And so one of the things that's being talked about is to further expand the idea of, on the 1970s addition, removing a part of that and then building a second piece. And that's very preliminary at this stage. We're right now in a phase of trying to reevaluate what our design and our program is. So comments that you provide to us will be helpful for us to take back and figure out when we come back with a formal application, what form that might take. And then I'm going to just zoom through a couple. There's an interest in keeping the existing tree there as well. And then I'd like to just zoom through a couple of images here really quickly that give you a sense of sort of the concepts. Another piece of this is to reorganize the interior of this. The wayfinding in the existing building is not very clear. And so part of the process would be to, looking at the ground floor, modify how people circulate. Currently, there are administrative functions on the ground floor that we're looking to move upstairs and allow the first level to serve our membership better in terms of having a variety of multi-purpose rooms that are open and more engaging and give a better appearance of Avenidas to the street along Bryant Street to people passing by. Creating a connection from Bryant Street to this atrium area at the back in a much more cleaner way. This all sort of stacks up to create a second floor level with offices and administration pieces up in the existing building, increasing some multifunctional, multi-purpose rooms with some flexibility, which is a key aspect for us. And I want to kind of zoom through this because I really want to allow for questions. And then just some very conceptual ideas about what it might feel like inside, this being in the atrium looking back out towards the parking. On the left side, a couple of these multi-purpose rooms, art room or fitness room programmatically would be an option. Then here looking through the existing arches in the back, which are the entry to the La Comida space, and will take you into the dining hall. And then a clear a glazing component up above that, again, trying to get light and air into the space. Other views along the same thing. Some concepts for the entry lobby on the front, and just an overall feel of trying to add a fresher look and modernization to this project to hope also garner up hopefully a more youthful participant and help to grow and expand our users for the next several years. This is quick diagrammatic sketches about the idea of expanding further, which shows another box that would be off to the left in this drawing, indicating another element, two-story element about the same size, all of which would basically sit behind the height of the existing Burge Clark building. That would add about another 5,000 square feet, roughly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I will return to the board for questions, and I will begin with board member. That's here. I guess we'll begin with board member Guyer.
I don't really have any questions at the moment. Very good presentation.
Vice Chair Pop.
Great, thank you very much. I'm pleased that I was able to join you yesterday. It was really great to tour around the building. I appreciate all the information that you shared. It was very useful, and thank you to staff for arranging that for us. I thought that was a great approach to starting the project. I wanted to just ask a question about why not save the garage carport as part of this. I think this may be something that has to go to HRB as well. But it occurs to me that there's this square footage that's back there, part of the very early fabric of this building. The La Comida building, while it sort of replicates the style of the structure, was a 1970s addition and seems to me much less valuable and in some ways more attractive to start with rather than starting on the other side. So if you could just talk for a moment about why you're intending to take the garage carport down right off the bat versus trying to start on the other side.
Yeah, well, I'll start with this. I've heard that comment also yesterday, and it was actually kind of an enlightening way to revisit this. So when we started, this work that you see is about 2 years old, and it's just kind of been fleshing out the issues. I think that's an interesting thing for us to study. Our original thought was that building had very little historic significance to the overall project, and it allowed for this sort of clean box area to be developed. And that was about, at the time, as far as the study went. There were some previous studies from about 8 years ago that took out all of that area and tried to build something taller. So fundamentally, we thought that was probably a best available space to organize a uniform new mass. We hadn't dialed too deeply into that historic significance and value of that. As you know, we've engaged ARG as our historic consultant. I'm not sure if you saw their findings report on the existing building. So, but in light of those comments, I think it's clearly something we will be revisiting. The one thing that I'm interested in seeing on our standpoint is that if we looked at preserving that, would it be feasible to go up 3 stories to offset the area that we probably would be losing? And I was there just yesterday thinking, well, if you're seeing it from the park, there's some very mature redwood trees that screen that. It's a small box. Each plate of it is only about 40 feet by 40 feet or something like that. And so I think that might be a very viable option, but it's something that we would like to study.
Great. You know, I think that you've had so much time to participate in this project. I got the drawings on Friday.
No,
so
yeah.
It really helps me to have you bring me along in your thinking a little
we
bit
want
and
to
understand it so that I can come to the same conclusions you
Well, we want
already.
to. And just to add, I've been involved in this in a long time, and a lot of what we've been involved in doing is trying to build an understanding amongst our board and our constituency that we can do something here to help support the strong need to continue the services at the highest level here in Palo Alto. And so what we had to do to get the excitement around this was to give the concept some form, give people something they could get excited about. And so all the comments that we are looking forward to receiving from you today will be taken, they'll be studied, and we'll be gladly coming back with you with how we've proposed to address these things. So everything that you can provide us with today as direction will be extremely helpful.
One last question for you. The tree. So
The tree.
It doesn't seem like it. I know this is a sacrilegious
Don't
thing
say
to
it. Don't say it.
I'm going to say it. It doesn't seem like it has a lot of value, right? If it is in the way, if it needs to be replaced, it's not a heritage tree. It's not an oak. It's not a redwood. It's a nice tree, but it actually doesn't look like it's thriving necessarily. The tree that's next to it looks much healthier. I would say that there's likely things that could be done to bring it back to health, and if it's important to save, we should start that process to make sure that it survives the construction. But I think that it's an example of a typical street tree that we have around Palo Alto all the time, and we remove and replace those often.
Yeah.
And so I'd hate to see the whole design evolve around something that is really optional. And I wanted to just check in about, have you evaluated other design concepts that consider removal of the tree?
To date, we have not, because I think we fundamentally thought the tree had some value. And as a starting point, we started with the idea of, well, if we're trying to preserve the building, wow, we're really ready to just cut this tree down. And so in a very flippant way, the tree kind of got a priority status prior to getting an arborist out there to look at its quality, its health, and its future sustainability. So what we do plan on doing is having that work looked at, and we'll entertain the idea of what other options are available to us if that weren't there. And so we heard that comment from someone else yesterday on the, I think it was the HRB, and so your comments are along the same lines, and I feel that that's something that it may offer us with some other flexible options. When you look at the composition out there with the tree there and the low building, it's very charming and very appealing. And so, and it often, I always find with new buildings, the ability to have mature trees there from day one always gives it a real kind of richness to it that usually takes some time to create. So, but the tree is something that we'll be looking at in much greater detail than has happened to date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Liu?
Are we just doing questions, or can we do both?
It's
It's a study.
it's a study session, so we're doing questions at this point, just clarifying questions at this point.
Is there, what is the condition of the Burge Clark building? Like, do you need, is it in good structural condition, or is it better to have like an addition right adjacent to it? 'Cause, you know, sometimes people will use the new building to brace the old building.
There was a seismic upgrade of the Burge Clark building in 1970 when Avenidas moved in here and remodeled it. We are currently also engaging a structural engineer to do a structural analysis of the building today in light of the building's current code and make recommendations on any retrofit items that are recommended. The concept of the design, though, is that the existing building will be reinforced as needed to comply with current code requirements, and the new structure will be seismically separated and independent from it structurally.
Got it. Great, thank you. And then I'm looking in the photos, and that there's a, it seems like there's some sort of mechanical equipment that's above the existing building.
There's a well.
Here's in the photo.
There's a well Which photo are you?
So on the last sheet, A4, there's a yeah, that was basically my question. I think in your 3D drawings, it was looking like there was a well, like that it was a mansard roof.
The existing, if you look at the diagram up here, the existing Burge Clark building has a mansard roof, so there's mechanical equipment inside of that well.
Right, and then that was my question, is that there's a photo.
So there's a photo, and it shows an element popping up.
Right, and so I was wondering if there's
existing
attic, if there's
There's
space.
no attic space. I think that's an existing mechanical component that's higher than the roof screen.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Malone Pritchard, questions?
As you were doing these layouts, did you give any consideration to the park and any ways to engage your constituency with the park?
In this concept, actually, which is really new, there is some of that. And if you walked around yesterday on that side, La Comida actually opens to the park. There's an access there. We don't do any kind of programming in the park. It's a public park, and that access isn't there. But I think one of the things that in a scheme like this, an expanded scheme, that I find interesting is to have some of the spaces oriented to the park. There's some beautiful redwood trees on that face, and an opportunity to do something that'd be more engaging in terms of the experience, either looking out on the park, which the sort of limited edition currently doesn't do. So I think there's a lot of value to that, particularly in an expanded concept.
And yesterday you talked a little bit about how you were moving administrative functions away from the Bryant Street entry so that there'll be some more vibrancy going on. Can you talk a little bit about the concept we're seeing here where there's an entry from Bryant and also one from the parking lot, and what's the genesis of that?
So here, this is kind of probably the best place to start. Currently, there is an entry on Bryant Street, which is in one of these pictures. Let me see if I can get there quickly. Here. So there's an entry here, and there's an entry here. And what we would look to do, this takes us into the lobby, and the improvements we would do to the interior would have people coming in the main lobby door and experiencing more of an open environment and seeing real activity. Currently on this face, there is administrative functions that we would be looking and taking and moving them upstairs conceptually in this wing of the building, allowing for this area as well as this area to have much more of a visual excitement that but our program currently lacks from the street. If you walk by the building 100 times, you probably don't pay much attention to it because it's not very clear what goes on there. And so we're trying to get that presence to happen on the street. There currently is a rear entrance as well off of the parking lot. Avenidas controls, I believe, 22 parking spaces in the rear lot, which our members have an opportunity to utilize. And then they come in from the rear also, which takes you here. You can see there's a gate. You come in between the little carriage building and the La Comida dining area, and then you come into this courtyard. So it's a travel path that we currently already have existing. It's just that once you get into the building, it's not very clear how to get from the front to the back because it's a little bit of a circuitous route to get there. And so part of what we're trying to do in this reconfiguration of the interior space is to create a greater sense of wayfinding that makes it clarity, let me jump here, kind of a clarity from the front to the back. And then the idea is that the two lobbies will have two different functions. This atrium lobby will allow for much more informal programming to happen, hopefully having our members take part in activities and linger afterwards and have a much more stronger sense of community by having spaces that can be informal and people can socialize, or there can be some informal programs offered in that area where the front lobby has a much more of a reception component to it, direction indicating people where to go for classes, and some other programmatic thoughts that we have about that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here yesterday to take a look at, to tour the facility, but I am familiar with it. I had my own senior moment. I was visiting my mom, and she's in assisted living, and so I understand the need. This is definitely an asset that's needed in this community, and will continue to be needed as we have a graying population here. And so expansion of this is very timely and appropriate. I'd like to begin by asking if you had looked at any other style for this addition.
To date, we have not.
Okay.
And when I say that, it doesn't mean we won't be. One of the things after we met yesterday, we had a task force meeting, and we talked about this idea of adding more space potentially if we can. The box that we're dealing with is how much can we afford to fundraise and build, and the sensitivity to that, and the challenge of providing all the infrastructure that supports that, parking, more restrooms, all this other stuff. And if you really look at it from a spatial standpoint, where 5,000 square feet isn't that much space, but to provide all the support functions that go around 5,000 square feet, the costs kind of grow. And so we are at a point where we are now really to kind of take what we've done to date and throw it aside. And so to say, in light of what we've done and the comments that we hopefully will hear from all of the parties, both your group, the HRB, the various building department, fire department comments we receive, reevaluate how the style of this is. For me, one of the things from a stylistic standpoint, it was important that the building be modern in some way, be more contemporary in some way, and not try to mimic the Burge Clark building or be in the same stylistic range. I've been very enamored by a number of architectural projects in which you see that comparison or composition is composed of a modern element and a historic element side by side, but trying to be respectful of the scale and massing of the existing building. And so there's still work to be done on our part there, and I would say I'm not actually 100% certain that the conceptual appearance of what you see today would be what would come back to you in another iteration of a preliminary.
I have a question for staff. Have we looked at all in terms of parking reductions for this building, for this project? One of the things with an aging population is that fewer seniors drive, especially if it's a daycare type setting where seniors that have cognitive disabilities or impaired cognitive function actually aren't going to be driving. So is there an opportunity here for parking reductions?
Thank you for that question. The beginnings of the parking topic, it starts with the PF zoning district. So this is a different zoning district than what comes up more frequently in downtown, which is the CD zoning district. So there are a lot of parking adjustments and so forth. Well, maybe not a lot, but there are definitely more parking adjustments that are at the disposal of the director. If the conditions can be made or can be found for the CD district than in the PF district. So I think that there is an adjustment that is based on shared parking and also off-site parking available in the PF district, maybe a few others. But otherwise, it is the in-lieu fee and so forth. So there are more limited options. And then this is in the PF zoning district, and it's also in the CD parking assessment district. And so the requirement is one parking space for every 250 square feet.
Wouldn't it possibly make more sense that in lieu fee go to support, expansion of the shuttle services, for instance?
I think that the applicant has recently generated a lot of information in regard to how their visitors arrive and leave the senior center. It's my understanding that approximately 58% of the visitors come by their own vehicle. And it's my understanding that a peak visitation time in the center is during the lunch period. And on a typical day, it's approximately 162 people that are there at peak, so 58%, 162. There's a demand there for parking, even with taking into account a mode split.
Okay. Okay, I don't have...
No, I would throw, if I guess it's a study session, so I think one of our biggest challenges for this project right now is how to deal with parking. The biggest question for us as a task force and team is just that issue. The building is owned by the city of Palo Alto. It's leased to Avenidas. We are in the process of renegotiating the lease. The previous lease identified, I think, like about 22 parking stalls and a framework or formula for dealing with the parking demand at the time that it was created. And that lease originated from 1970s. And so we're trying to revise this lease and address the current needs and demands, both in terms of operational issues, but the parking component, the ability to fundraise to support buying into the in lieu fee or building parking is one of the challenges that we have to sort of overcome and get a better understanding on. And staff has been helpful of trying to set up some meetings here with various parties in the city to help us get through that process. But that one issue probably is the most fundamental thing that we're faced with. And meaning that in some cases it's $1 million plus $1 million to support parking for this, which for us is, it doesn't have much appeal to donors to support their donations to that level. So we're hopeful that in some fashion we can get a amenable solution to the parking.
I have one last question. The site where the parking lot currently is where the city hall used to be located, correct? Yeah.
Behind it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we will open the public hearing. If there are members of the public that wish to speak to this item, you may do so at this time. I don't see any public speakers, so we'll return to the board for our comments, and we will begin with Board Member Guyer.
I like the initial concept. I've never been a fan of trying to make the addition mimic to any great extent the existing building. I wasn't a big fan of what was done across the street or attempted to be done across the street for the was it University Arts Building. I like the idea that the building should stand on its own merit. And I do have to agree, you know, the addition, the 79 addition, I guess it's a situation, if it's already there and it's structurally sound, why not use it? But I wouldn't be opposed if you needed additional space, or, you know, sometimes it's tougher to, or it's more costly to add only 5,000 square feet than it is to add something more. Once you've started going, you know, sort of the economy of scale idea, that I wouldn't have a problem if you wanted to take both of the additions off and work it that way. I could see that. This building stands on itself, and it's pretty obvious that the two that are there are obviously additions. It's not that they were created in you know, when it was first done. So I think you're well on your way to you know, a good project.
Vice Chair Pop.
So I'm always a big proponent of what you can do well, you should do, and you should hold off until you can really do it well. So I'm going to encourage you to, you know, do all the studies that you're talking about, right? Really evaluate a lot of different options, get some pricing information, do some research into what your community is capable of in regard to fundraising, and set yourself a target and try and exceed that, you know, to go go beyond. There's tremendous capacity in this community. Being the project director from the Jewish Community Center, Toby Corrett campus, where we raised $140 million. There's capacity out there. You just have to go find it. And this is a particularly compelling program to support. I think that it's so vital to our community, particularly at this stage where we've got boomers moving into this age group. In just a couple of years, I'm going to be eligible to come over there and have lunch too. So I'm really so much in favor of the concept of what you're doing here. And like Board Member Goyer here, I'm perfectly comfortable with one or both or all, however you want to go about this. I think that the overall idea that you have of not just preserving but sort of returning the Burge-Clark building back to its origin seems like the really right way to go about this. Taking the stair off of the back, altering that. As you talked about the idea of that rear lobby and the value of that to your programs, it's very compelling. I completely understand why you would dedicate that kind of volume back there to that. I do think there is value in that tree. There is certainly something to be said for a mature tree, and having that on day one, it adds a lot of character. But that said, it's not a vital tree. And so if removing that and adding more in another way, I'm much more interested in the 20-year vision, the 50-year vision, than I am in the 3-year vision. I am interested in understanding whether or not there's value in that garage carport, and incorporating that into some clever design and making that part of what you do seems valuable to me. I think that there is likely some very subtle changes that you could make to the La Comida building that will quickly indicate that, although that looks similar to the Burge-Clark, it's an addition. It was something different, and it's meant to look that way. I think marketing that program to the park, now that the park has been so nicely cleaned up, and we've controlled the kind of behavior that was going on over there in a much better way, it's more attractive to me to increase the density on that side. And I like very much the way you're describing, potentially even a 3-story building behind those redwoods seems very appropriate to me. And to create a building that has one elevator and stacks right up, very efficient use of space and dollars. I'm very much in support of what Board Member or Chair Lippert has said about the parking. I think that there's likely a very logical case for a parking reduction here, and I would encourage you to very carefully study not just the 1 to 250 as across the 5,000 square feet, but take your circulation space and your mechanical requirements, all of those things out of that before you start to evaluate how many spaces you need. And all of a sudden, it's not 20, it's 15, it's 12, and in a lot of places in Palo Alto, I'm very concerned about the appropriate parking being provided, that we have enough. For this particular program, I think it's very easy to say that a great component of your program comes by alternate means of transportation, carpool, drop-off, whatever it might be. And so it's really the right kind of project to take a reduction on, and to not burden the project budget with a significant in lieu charge just because, but to really be careful about that. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. I think there's a whole range of opportunity for you here, and while I'm not adverse to the suggestion that you've made about architecture today, if there's something else that you come up with, I'm sure that we'll find a very nice solution to that. So I just want to thank you for coming forward and starting to explain the project to us in this way, and we'll look forward to partnering with you as you go through this. Thank you.
Board Member Liu.
So thank you for the tour yesterday. It was really eye-opening. I've never been inside that building. it was sort of, yeah, it was just shocking, actually, to me. I have been in the Mountain View Senior Center, which also has an Avenidas component, and it's like night and day. And I think that we need to go over towards the Mountain View approach, which is much more open and spacious. When you walk in the front door, it's just like a community center. And I think that your ideas about moving the office space and all of that is all good. I think I would probably encourage you to try to activate the park side of your building more if you can. It seems relatively quiet, even though it is a lunch thing. It seems like relatively quiet to me when I go, but I don't usually go by there at lunchtime. It's usually in the evenings. I think the idea of filling in the courtyard to me is, I understand it because you're constrained by your lease lines, but it seems like, yeah, it seems a little bit of a shame because I like the courtyard. I don't know how important the courtyard is to the programming on the site, but it seems like a really nice place. My inclination would be to go up on the La Comida side and try to keep at least portion of the courtyard. With regard to the parking that's been mentioned, I guess I would be curious as to how many times like your meeting rooms could be rented out to the public, right? So the Mountain View Senior Center, they have regular community meetings that have nothing to do with seniors. They just have, it's a rental facility. So I would be concerned about a parking reduction in that case. I'm generally in favor of them, but yeah, I would just want to see what you guys are thinking of with regard to those spaces. And on the tree, I'm sort of in agreement with Board Member Pop. I wouldn't revolve everything around the tree because it seems to me in like not great condition. I mean, I would think that to me, this is like a really important building. The Cogswold Plaza area around downtown has been, to me, like relatively quiet, or like too quiet for such for downtown Palo Alto. And I think this is a great opportunity to sort of enliven that, enliven that whole portion of downtown. So having like a modern glass facades facing out to the public area is, to me, like can potentially help activate it. And again, and also as you mentioned, changing some of the existing ground floor spaces on Bryant is also, I think, really critical in making it much more of a public building and generating interest. So yeah, but you've got quite a design challenge and a fundraising challenge, it seems like to me. We look forward to seeing it come back.
Before we go to Board Member Malone Pritchard, it's Board Member Malone Pritchard's last meeting today, so the chair is going to take the prerogative of going out of order, and I'll have my comments next, and Board Member Malone Pritchard will have the last word on this item. So with regard to the item, I'm very excited about this project. I think it's, as I said before, it's a very necessary project with a graying population. I have a number of concerns, however. One is the parking issue, which I've talked about earlier, but probably what's more significant or more important than that is that we have this parking lot right in front of the back of the building, and my concern with the demand and the need for downtown parking, that could very well wind up being a site of a parking structure at some point in the future. So when you're building this new entrance off of the parking lot, it would be quite unfortunate for it to become internal and locked in between a new parking structure and the historic building. With that being said, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here with regard to recognizing the historic nature of the building, as well as the historic site of the city hall that is in the parking, where the parking structure currently is, in creating a new entrance. And what I'm thinking of is Robert Venturi was commissioned to design a, the house, or the what recognized as Benjamin Franklin's laboratory and home in Philadelphia. And rather than building an actual building there, what he had was a floor plan, and then had built sort of a wire frame of what people envisioned the house might have been like based on other styles in Philadelphia. And I'm thinking of the Plaza Ramona building. Plaza Ramona building is a new building, but it emulates or replicates similar features to what was originally there on that corner. That building originally had been taken down, a bank went in there, and then subsequently the bank came down and Plaza Ramona was built, and it has 2 floors of underground parking, one of which is public parking. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here to look at maybe, and I'm just thinking out loud, maybe rather than having the building be built towards the back, actually building it forward on the parking lot, and maybe putting all of that parking plus any additional parking that you need subsurface. And maybe because it's a public facility in the city, maybe they can contribute some of their funds towards a parking structure and going underground. But ultimately what it does is it brings that component out to the street. And that's just a sort of a thought in terms of how to begin to address or look at this. This is going to be, for the time being, an underutilized building. When you say that you have 150 people, you know, seniors that are there during the day, how many? Oh, no, 300 to 400 over the course of the day. 300 to 400, wow. We're gonna have a lot more people in that building. And so it's a very important asset to this community. And so I think that the challenge is to get it to work and to have it be able to thrive and be recognized. Following up on Vice Chair Pop's comment with regard to the tree, I think it's a non-starter. Get rid of the tree if it doesn't serve you. The building shouldn't be built around the tree. You can do other landscaping. I think internal courtyards are very important. I think if the 2 buildings were built as wings with the courtyard internal to it, I think that's going to be far more valuable. Seniors with dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive impairment, they're going to be protected by this courtyard. It's going to wind up being an asset where people will be able to come to that location, be outside, and not get lost. And then the last thought that I have is that there needs to be some sort of gesture or acknowledgement of the adjacent park that's there, that looking into the park and making use of that park and connections to that park are particularly important. So with that, we will go to Board Member Malone Pritchard, who will have the final words on this.
Thank you, and I wanted to acknowledge that I believe this is also your final hearing, so were those your last words? Probably not. Okay, good. So what do I have to say about this? I really applaud what you're doing. Huge need for the community. I think you're doing absolutely the right thing, studying all the different options and getting all the input you can before you go out and start your fundraising. I've worked on projects like that, and I know what the struggle is. I think that outdoor space is really important to seniors and to anybody going to a community center. So I would encourage you to have some element of courtyard It may not be where it currently is, it may not be as big as it currently is, but I think it really needs to be an important element of your program. I'm in agreement with my colleagues on the tree. It's a nice tree, but if it really doesn't work keeping the tree in that location, another one can be brought in. As far as the carport and the La Comida buildings, if I had to choose one to save, it would be the carport, not the La Comida. And I'm definitely in support of you going up 3 stories if that means that you can maintain more outdoor space, more open space, and also trying to maintain more visibility of the original building. So I'm not in favor of filling in that entire site with more building. And I would also echo the comments on the park. Any openings to the park, communication, more than just looking at it, but actually maybe having programs spill out onto it. It's a public park, you're allowed to use it. You can't cordon off a section and make it yours, but you can certainly take advantage of it. But it's an exciting project, and I'll be looking forward to seeing how it progresses over the years.
Any other comments? Okay, with that, we'll finish up that item. Okay, so we come to last item on the agenda, which are board staff announcements, updates, reports, and comments. Anything that you would like to say, Director?
A big thank you. That's what I'd like to say to Lee Lippert for his many stints as chair and vice chair over the many years. I had prepared a little something, but darn it, it's not with my paperwork today. But I would like to, plan on a lunchtime event that we can say thank you in a more better way. But I wanted to just thank you at this moment, and same to Claire Malone Pritchard, who has been also in the roles here, chair and vice chair, I believe, at maybe several times. So thank you again for your service. You've both been instrumental to many projects in this town, and the town should be very grateful for your service. I know I am. Thank you.
Board Member Malone Pritchard, would you like to say something?
Just very thankful for having the opportunity to serve with all of you, and learned a lot from everybody, and mostly had a good time. So thank you.
Well, I would like to, first of all, I'd like to thank you as well as your staff. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve this community. I also want to thank my fellow board members. I think that I really enjoyed coming back to the ARB after being on the Planning and Transportation Commission. I have a new appreciation for the Architectural Review Board. And just in closing, I just want to make two comments here. One is that we're a very fortunate and blessed community here. We have a very rich environment. And one of the things that's so important about architecture is that it is a way for the present day to be able to communicate to future generations to come. That in some ways, Palo Alto's legacy is really the future. And so the buildings that we build today are important in terms of being able to speak to those future generations in terms of our aspirations and goals. And so with that, I have some parting gifts here. That's for you, Robert.
Thank you.
Alex. This is for Claire. Randy.
Thank you.
This is for you, Amy. And if you wouldn't mind, please giving that to Russ as well. I actually have two more here. These are for the new ARB members.
All right, I'll take care of that.
The new ARB members will be appointed on Monday, November the 10th, God willing. And I just want to wish them luck, and I think that they'll do a terrific job here. So thank you again. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Take me with you, you're not getting out of here alone. Darling, in your heart you've always known how much you need me. We're such a perfect combination, me without you makes me blue. So I'll only let you go